It's that time of the week, everybody! It's
Friday, baby, and that means TLF, Tier List Fridays.
And we're doing it. We're looking at range DPS in raids after the race has finished, man, because we have been talking about the race and the meta and all of that good stuff, and now it's done.
I mean, what the things have changed since the last time we did a range DPS tier list, and it's going to be very interesting to see and compare what has been happening in the past and what we have predicted to see now. Like, I think it's safe to say that this is kind of a, I would say, clearer picture, since a lot of the players now have either at least 2 set and double Legos, but most of them, I think they have 4 set already. And it's a bit of a shift, man. Not a shit. It's a bit of a shift.
It's a bit of a shift. We are looking at a 95 percentile and up, so you know we're looking at people that can get the most out of their specs as possible, overall performance and things. So looking forward towards.
But the last disclaimer: any of these specs right here can do very good regardless of the content that you do. So please play what you enjoy. Don't necessarily make your decisions on what's based on meta and 95 percentile plus. But you should be able to play your spec correctly. Yeah, that being said, let's start it off with Affliction Warlock.
Speaking of what you should play that you enjoy.
Listen, Affliction Warlock didn't change that much from the last time. It's still, and this is the thing, right? It's not that it's a bad spec. It's the fact that the other specs within,
are just good.
Yeah, they're better. they're better within the whole of the fight. So,
oh boy. Well, Affliction did have its time in the spotlight, this expansion, and right now it's not doing too great. It's currently in D tier. We placed it in D tier. It's not the worst spec, but it's like as close as you can get. Now, listen, this just means that you're not doing stupid damage like the top specs you will see in this list, because goddamn, that is just not possible. But Affliction is still viable. Obviously, you're still a Warlock. You bring all the Warlock utility and all that good stuff. We talk about it every time. Affliction is fine. It doesn't get the most out of its tier set and the double legendaries as other specs would get.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's a D tier. But moving along to, I would say, a better looking spec, Arcane Mage. It's again another spec.
Better.
Yeah, I mean, listen, these specs usually that are more to, let's say, to the bottom of the tier list have to, like, their biggest problem is not that they're bad. It's just they have to compete with another spec within their own class that has a lot more going for them. That's what I'm saying. So if you really like the fantasy of an Arcane Mage or an Affliction Warlock, that's totally fine. When you see tier lists like these that are based on parses and logs and a lot of data based onto them, you can obviously understand that most of these players who are progressing within the raid are actually optimizing to play the absolute best spec in terms of like pure numbers. But Arcane,
I think up until this week, Arcane was the #1 Mage spec overall in terms of performance. Not by a lot, but it was. However, right now is about C tier-ish. It's doing better than Affliction overall.
Almost B tier, but not.
Now, the thing that we use to judge these specs, and we can talk about it as we go into Beastmastery as well, is looking at logs and overall performance of the specs. This takes into consideration how many bosses each spec has cleared in Mythic, because not everybody has cleared the entire Mythic raid, and I think probably almost nobody has logged Mythic Anduin yet, I think. Or at least some of the specs have definitely not touched. No, they have. Some of them touched, some of them did not.
Few logs on Anduin for sure.
It's kind of, it's still going to be a little bit biased. We'll probably know more when pretty much everybody has, I don't know, at least a couple of 100 parses on each boss. But until then, specs like Beastmastery as well will also be D tier.
Oh no!
Because
why?
Hunter is, well, Beastmastery kind of got the shortest end of the stick when it came to the tier sets.
Not survival? What do you mean? Survival is melee. We're not talking about melee.
You have watched our last week's episode, so you know where survival is, and clearly people are going to optimize. And not only survival, Marksman is doing pretty well for itself, so we'll check that in a second. But until then, Beastmastery, unfortunately, can be the next in line to get some buffs, because if you have been paying attention, we've been getting buffs and buffs every week.
This week was from specs. Yeah, well, this kind of what always happens after the Race to World First. You're going to see a lot of changes to the bosses and a lot of tuning for the specs and classes and stuff. So we're expecting a lot of these specs to be addressed one way or another. Now, moving along to a former king within the raid scene.
This is a weird one.
It's really weird, right?
It's really weird because right now, let's just place it in the log so we can talk about it, why it's there.
So it's a C tier.
tier spec, but however, it's one of the specs that does the most amount of damage, because if you look at sub creation, which usually takes a look at just in the last week or so, it's an A tier spec. Boomkin, that is. Venthyr Boomkin especially does crazy damage. I mean, we're looking at Anduin, I think, is doing like... Anduin is obviously a good...
It's a good boss for everybody.
Kindly,
that's word for you.
It's, I mean, you could call it bad, but for instance, we are still kind of left with like 1 or 2 ads at the end of the phase, at the end of the Lich King phase. So it's not really bad if not all of the ads are just dying really quick. So the ads still have to be killed pretty quickly, and Boomy is doing like massive single target damage. So I don't know how much of it ends up being pad damage on Anduin, because Boomkin's speciality is just sinking those arcane those pulse that are astral power into the
it's Boomkin also
searches.
does really good in AoE, man. I mean, there's no denying. I know this is the thing about them, is like when you're looking at Venthyr Boomkins, they do big ass burst, and they have to do this once in a blue moon. See what I did there?
That's so funny, man. But that's the thing, if you look at sub creation, you'll probably see Boomy a lot higher, likely because maybe sub creation is taking into consideration the last week where the inflation of power with the double legendaries and the tier set comes in, I would imagine. So I'm likely going to not be surprised if, let's say, in about a month's time we'll see Boomy up a couple of tiers. Right now, as it stands up until this progression, because maybe some of you haven't gotten your 4-piece yet, Boomkin is around there. It's still good, like being a C tier that pumps like over 30k damage on Anduin, which is crazy. Not a lot of specs can do that. It's still pretty good, and that's, you know, just a big numbers fight, but still in every other fight it does a lot of fucking damage, man. And Boomkin is still retaining its Venthyr power of, you know, every 3 minutes you fucking chop shit, man.
That's what I was saying. It's like every 3 minutes, but after that, you know. All right, let's get the bullshit. Let's get to the real deal here. Let's get to the realness, because the next spec on the list here has been, I would say, in the gutter for the longest time ever, and we're happy to see
in the shadow of Affliction.
In Affliction and Distro as well. I'm talking about like a couple of expansion span worth of time. So Demonology Warlock right now is purely the best range DPS
it's
spec.
Definitely, it's like put it all the way up to S tier.
S tier for sure.
Survival levels, performance.
Come on,
it's
man.
doing better than everybody else by a large margin right now. Survival on even if you look on Warcraft logs, even on subcreation, Demo is a fucking king,
and a powerhouse.
I'm so happy, man, dude. Like this tier with Demonology Enhancement being 2 of my favorite DPS specs, and always underdogs and survival, and they're all S tier. Come on, dude. Yeah, and I'm tanking.
It's good times for the Demonology player for sure. And yeah, this is a strong argument. I feel this is kind of cyclical with a couple of the specs within WoW. At some point,
good.
It is good. Yes, it's good now because, you know, players play it right now. But like when you're playing a spec that is not necessarily doing well a whole tier, then it becomes a bit of a shame. Remember Enhancement and Castle Nether? I mean that was such,
horrible. But I mean we're looking at a.
Remember Subbroke during whole of the BFA?
Jesus Christ! This is the thing, right? Because I might be remiss to say this, but I think we're looking at a new age of WoW where like things keep getting. Oh my god, people are gonna come with the pitchforks when I say that shit, but things are changing week to week basis, and we're seeing more buffs and nerfs than we have seen in a long time. And like underdog specs performing consistently right now with Demonology as well, and likely we're going to see buffs to stuff like Affliction and Beastmastery in the future. So,
would you see buffs to Destrolock?
I don't know, man.
I bloody not.
Destrolock is actually very close.
One of the best still, and this was like I remember like a couple of tier lists ago when we were talking about ranged, Destro didn't really look that hot.
Destro actually looked really well. I don't remember
no. It was, I think it was somewhere around B or C tier in comparison.
I think
to
we
the
can pull it up for the video to showcase where this was before.
Maybe I'm mistaken, but right now things have definitely changed because let's be real. We're gonna see the specs that can perform really well in Cleave and AoE are generally going to dominate, and as much as numbers get inflated and they get padded onto a lot of these bosses, and you have to understand a lot of these logs and numbers are coming from a lot of Anduin logs, of course. but generally, Sepulchre of the first ones is a heavy cleave AoE type of raid. I think there's Collex that's pure single target, and then Halandrus, and Jailer.
If we really want
I don't
to
think there's anything else. And then Rigalon. Okay, so that's 4 bosses.
The Segni kind of has cleave, so that's kind of good for
the what?
The Segni?
Dosegni. Yeah, okay, Dosegni. That's how you pronounce it. Yeah, but still cleave. I mean, you can still see a Destro lock there performing great. This is the thing.
But even in single target, it's pretty good.
I know. It's just that it does really great in single target, and it does very good in cleave as well. And having like 4 bosses out of 11 just pure single target, rest of them having all of these or adds or cleave or whatever, just goes to show that a couple of these specs will reign supreme. Now, going back to Demo, when you get all of those imps and you start popping them off, Jesus Christ. But what Destro is like,
Destro is similar to Bunkin-ish kind of, where it has like its big burst during its big cooldowns. However, Demonology has a faster rolling Tyrant, so
but isn't it more uptime. Yeah, but now with the double legendary, don't you have that legendary where you spawn Infernals like the?
That's
random,
actually the tier set.
That's the tier set, right? Not the double.
The 4-piece. So with the 2-piece,
because I've seen some clips and I've seen a couple of Infernals.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. Really cool.
It's cool.
And it's really makes the Infernal phase really good. And that's what puts Destro into fucking A tier, man.
We took it.
It's very close. I mean, it's as close to Demonology as any spec can be close to Demonology. Still pretty far off, but it is a second Warlock spec that's doing really good. And this is really surprising because you would think that if Demo was the king that it is, pretty much everybody would playing Demo, and you would see Destro maybe B tier or something like that. Sure. But Destro is actually really cooking it, man.
For sure. Now, Elemental Shaman is in its element. Elemental Shamans, I guess this is a pretty strong spec overall. Not the highest performer, not the lowest performer. It maintained its consistency. I think we can safely put it into a B tier, close to A.
It's B tier.
It's B tier. We have to differentiate.
It's a little bit ways away from Destro, so I think it's fair to put it into B tier. Elemental is doing really good. I mean, obviously it has to kind of compete with Enhancement, which is doing a little bit better than Elemental, to be fair. But
how long have we been waiting for that?
You wouldn't expect that to hear that thing. But Elemental is good. It's solid. It's always been a really decent raid spec. It has a lot of builds. It has some utility. It has some kind of mobility. It's not really restricted to staying a lot in one place because you do have a lot of instant procs that you fire off, a lot of shocks and stuff, which is really good.
Another spec that can really do well on a lot of cleave and a lot of AoE as well.
Oh yeah, funnel those flame shocks. Ooh.
It's an amazing spec altogether. We've been big fans of Elemental Shaman. I've been a big fan just like, watching players play it because I feel like it's one of the most spectacular specs to look at and hear it and everything. So it's, I would say Elemental did not struggle that much. I would say to the entirety of Shadowlands, at least in the raid scene, it has had a consistent spot wherever it went. So props to the Elemental players.
It's a solid spec, yeah.
All right,
for sure.
Fire Mage is not that hot anymore.
Actually, this is the thing. Okay. I think the remaining of the specs, at least the Mage specs, are also very difficult to place.
Yeah,
because Fire Mage is kind of like in a Boomy perspective. It's actually in C tier between Arcane and Boomy. Arcane is actually a little bit better than both of these specs in terms of overall performance, but it's not quite close to B spec, which is why it's in C and why you see Fire there. But again, Fire is... If you look on certain fights, it's the best Mage spec and maybe even the best range specs on certain fights because it's pumping really hard. I'm thinking about, looking at how our Fire Mage is doing on...
well, our Fire Mages are fucking gods. I mean, come on. I mean, there's fights where you would shine, we have a spec that would shine more than others, that's fine. But we're looking at the overall numbers from the raid. And again, guys, this does not mean that Fire Mage is worse than a Destruction Warlock. This is like what the numbers indicate so far in terms of like placing everybody. Of course, I personally always loved Fire Mage. I think it's one of the funnest specs to play in the whole wide world, and you cannot like just shit on it because of the logs indicate that some of these other
shit on all I want, man.
Yeah,
fucking Fire Mages.
Fire Mages can really do well, and again, we have I think 2 Fire Mages right now in our group, and they're like dominating all the time.
They're helping us get tier set, so that's good.
Yeah,
get those bosses down.
It is C tier for now in terms of like the creme de la creme. time in the raids, but this is just because other specs are pulling numbers more.
Similar to Boomkin, I would expect Fire Mages to rise a couple of tiers later on, because I don't know if all of the Fire Mages that have been contributing to the performance of the current tier set have, let's say, the 4-piece. I would imagine everybody has the double legendaries by now, but I don't think they have the 4-piece yet, all of them, because Fire is doing a lot better. Let's say, I'm bringing up Subcreation again because Subcreation just uses more recent data. Well, Warcraft logs kind of rounds them up a little bit more, which kind of has to be the case. Otherwise, we would just have like a different tier set every day, and that's just stupid. Tier list. But yeah, I don't get my tier set as well. I'm fucking crazy right now.
I'm sorry, man. But okay, let's just keep cool and let's move to the Frost Mage.
You wanted to do that segue, man. I feel it. Feel it in the air.
Frost Mage, again, very complicated spec to rank over here. It's definitely better than Fire, at least in terms of like the numbers.
A little bit, not by too much, but it is. There's a difference.
I think there's the consistency there as well. You have to remember that Frost got a couple of buffs up until this point, and now we're rolling with double Legos and tier sets.
This is actually surprising to point out that Frost has been struggling with single target for a while, and although has been king in Mythic Plus, for the past couple of patches, the raid scene didn't really see it shine too much.
But still, I mean, even if so, you know, they have been doing better at single target than in the past. However, as mentioned before, when you have a Frost Mage and you have like 7 bosses that require cleave and AoE, you're definitely going to see some Frost Mage godness over there. And I think one of our mages in the team switched to Frost for a couple of fights. And
I have to say, man, that the Frost is the cool mage spec.
Yeah, man, why do you gotta do that, man? Why do you gotta do that? It's the one at this point, I think it's behind Elemental Shaman.
It's B tier.
Just like,
I mean, take this with a grain of salt. If you had, let's say, one amazing player on Frost more this week, you'd probably see Frost ahead of Elemental. So they're pretty much equal when it comes to the same tier. But it's kind of there, and it's fine. I'm not too sure about Frost. I see Fire jump tiers a little bit more than Frost. Frost is kind of stable-ish, but we'll see how this turns out in a couple of weeks.
Stable-ish. Okay, a big pumper on the next row here.
Actually.
Yeah, Marksmanship, Hunterman, kicking ass and taking names. One log did you see?
I think I've seen. Well, obviously Gingy's wrecking it right now.
Oh yeah, Gingy on the Marksman for sure. Yeah,
Gingy is a fucking god on Marksman. Marksman is all the way up to 8 here, really close to Destro.
Yeah.
It's on certain, if you look at certain data, you know, batches, Marksman is doing better than Survival. So I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
Dude, I mean...
And in AoE too, Marksman is doing really good. I mean, I think I was looking at... Again, I bring up Anduin because it's fun to see.
It's very relevant. It's very relevant.
I know a lot of people will say it's a lot of pad, but I don't care. It's big numbers. It's fine.
Everybody pads over there. Shut up.
And if everybody pads, you'd probably expect Survival to be king. But I think in the top 5, if I recall, it's just a bunch of demos. And there's one Survival and one Marksman, and just both of these. And the thing is, both of these guys, the Marksman being Gingy, they log their fights without the double legendary. So there's been some time. It was some time ago, and they're still in the top 5, man. Yeah. Imagine them having all of the shit ready. It's like crazy.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Just goes to show that a spec like Marksman can really do well, you know,
in the right hands.
Without the full external power and in the right hands. Once we get to like the whole the level playing field with all of these specs, I'm pretty sure a lot of things will change around. But I doubt Marksman will drop too much really within the tier. It's a very powerful,
really good.
Yeah, and the tier set definitely bumped it up. This is I would say one of the quote-unquote problems for a lot of the specs. The 4 set for some really pushed them hard, while some don't get that much. You know, Feral Druid.
Poor Ferals, man. I also want to mention that I'm not 100% sure. I know there was a bug with Marksman tier set that hasn't necessarily been fixed, or we even talked about it on the podcast. That might be a factor, although I'm not 100% up to date with everything Marksman. So there is a likelihood chance that it might not keep its 8 tier in the future, but we'll see.
Could be. Okay, so now, last but not least, once again, one of our favorite specs of all time, Shadow Priest, which...
man, it's been hit with a lot of single target nerfs this patch, and right now it's still doing decent.
No, I mean, okay, you wouldn't expect it with the nerfs to be be. If the nerfs wouldn't happen, I think Shadow Priest would most definitely be at least A tier.
Oh,
however,
easy.
Yeah, but however, this doesn't mean that the spec isn't performing really well. I mean, in terms of like numbers, it's way not way, but better than, you know, Affliction, Arcane, Fire Mage, all of that. I think it's around B tier, like really close to Fire Mage, which I did not expect. Shadow Priest is like one of those specs where, okay, they can do very good in most of the fights, and then talking about, you know, cleave and AoE, but I think the shininess will always come from the single target and all of those. Do they still shine and execute phases?
They do. I mean, I haven't checked if they play Twist of Fate, but I would imagine they would play it on stuff like, let's say, Last Phase Anduin, or most likely Jailer and such.
Exactly, yeah, Jailer fights as well. Don't know how many logs we get there, but regardless, Shadow Priest is one of those specs that, you know, played correctly. If it's in your team and it's like a master Shadow Priest, I'm thinking about San or Patreon, you know, and Public and stuff, they could easily dominate the charts, man.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
This is the thing. But on the other hand, when you have a team where like most of the players try to optimize and play the specs that are delivering the best, and you have one or two off, let's say, quote-unquote meta specs, Shadow Priest will be somewhere in the mid-range tier,
in the
right?
middle of the Holy Priest section. We kid the Shadow Priest, but this is kind of how the tier list looks. This week, this is the week after the race has finished. We'll see how things will evolve in the future. Right now, this is kind of how it's looking. Most likely, by the next time we check range DPS, probably the Hall of Fame, at least for Horde side, will be done, so we'll have like a more rounded out performance of all of the specs, plus everybody will definitely have their BIS
by that time, I mean,
4-piece, and yeah, for sure.
It's gonna be
so
100%.
Look, it's fun. It's fun to see things jump around all this much and seeing prior D-C tier jumping at the head of the curve, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, but you know what else jumps around all the time? Our Patreons, who keep on jumping of joy because of the content that we do, and they're supporting it. Thank you guys from the bottom of our heart for keeping on the flag going and the passion going and the support going. It's been amazing. You know, you're just supporting all of the content, the class guys, the TLFs, the MoCat podcast, on cooldown Wednesday shows.
You heard it here first, folks.
And if you're interested in what all this Patreon is about, Flame will tell you.
Check it out. We have the link to our Patreon and a bunch of other stuff in the description, which you can check. And if you go to our Patreon page, you'll find different tiers, because maybe you're interested in supporting us in different types of levels. And we have some goodies in store for you, like, you know, wallpapers or access to bloopers or things like that you might enjoy. So check it out, and thank you for the support.
Yeah, or cookies. Thanks for watching the video, and have a great weekend ahead. All right? Okay. See ya.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.